how to get in to information security in 2020. If you're thinking about getting into information security, right now you are seeing play out, across the country, across the world, why there is such an overwhelming need for information security specialists and experts. Everyone at this point, they pay attention to the things that they take for granted, like they're just going to come to the building and their email is going to work and the firewall is going to be doing what it's supposed to do, and security managers just understand certain things. But what most people don't see is everything that goes into the background of how those people got to where they are. And there's lots of different paths that you can take to get into the space in this particular career field that you fit best. And people have a tendency to put information security and cybersecurity all in this one big ball, right? As if they were all the same. But there are dozens of specialties within the field of information security, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those this afternoon. And of course, I want to be able to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and maybe something particular in your individual case is that you'd like, maybe my opinion on a recommendation. So before we get to there, I'm going to spend a little bit of time introducing myself to you. And to do that, like anything else, right, the best place to start is kind of always the beginning. So my name is Mike Redmond. I have a master's degree in cybersecurity, a couple undergraduate degrees, one in network engineering, as well as another undergraduate degree in psychology. Well, that's an interesting story. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that a little later. As well as a couple associate's degrees, and I attended the Cisco CCNA Academy. So that's kind of the foreground or the background that I'm coming from, and understand, and maybe you can see a picture developing that is a very, very wide and varied background, right? Not only from a technical point of view, but also from an analytical and a social point of view, right? Things that I learned while studying psychology have come in great handy, right? As I progressed through my cybersecurity career. I've been doing cybersecurity specifically for roughly 14, 15 years now. Sometimes, it feels like I'm getting older by the second, right? I went to bed last night at 25. I woke up this morning at 45, right? And it's just amazing how time has flown by. But ever since I decided to devote all my time to cybersecurity, even though there's been plenty of downsides, by and large, it's been a fun and exciting journey to get to where I've been able to get. So as far as certifications, a handful of the ones that you would expect, right? CISSP, CISM, ethical hacker, things like that. There really isn't enough space on the slide for all the rest of the certifications, but those are the ones that it seems most people want to pay attention to, and in this field, that's about right. I have intentionally stayed away from product or vendor specific types of certifications, simply because I found that for what I wanted to do and how I wanted to get there, I didn't want to get kind of typecast into, well, he's a Cisco specialist, or he's a NetApp specialist, or he's a Palo Alto specialist, right? So, but I can, I have and continue to work with all of those products over the course of my days. But at the end of the day, routing is routing, switching is switching. basic cyber hygiene is still basic cyber hygiene, regardless of the products that may be available. So that's a little bit about me, a little bit of my background. Currently, I am a corporate ISSM for a defense research company. They create and manage radar algorithms, basically. So I spend my days with rooms full of literal rocket scientists, and it is amazing some of the things that they come up with. Unfortunately, I still have to remind them more often than I should to stop clicking the link. Brightest minds on the face of the planet, and they still cannot resist clicking the link. So, what is cybersecurity? What is this thing we call cybersecurity? Excuse me. So at its heart, right, what cybersecurity is, it is where people, processes, and technology converge. That is the practice of cybersecurity. How do I, from whatever my area of responsibility is, how do I fit into that greater puzzle of managing the cybersecurity for an organization? And it can come from almost any direction, right? Whether it is how do I manage people and how people interact with the facility and with the data on the networks and so forth. How do I manage the processes of how people enter the facility, or how they log in, or certain training that they may have to do annually, things like that. And then technology. How do I permit technology to be used or not be used inside the organization, as well as ensuring that they are enabling the organization to do what the organization is there to do. So at its heart, right, that is what cybersecurity is all about. Okay. Now I've been teaching classes at the more advanced levels for about 5 or 6 years, and I try to impress on all my students, for instance, that cybersecurity is not an exact science. It's an art. There's no right way. There's no one way to do something. It's often a mixture of a lot of different techniques to make sure that the organization is meeting its overall stated goals. Now, what those stated goals are, that is not for me to determine, right? I, as the ISSM for the organization, I take my cues from the executive suite, the C-suite, right? So whatever the CEO or the COO or the CFO indicates are the business objectives. It's my job to design and manage a cybersecurity program that enables those objectives. And that enablement for that organization will not necessarily look like the same enablement that you would, maybe find in, Walmart's corporate office, or, Best Buy's corporate office, and your doctor's office, right? While a lot of the techniques may be similar, the mission focus is completely different, right? Where one has a higher concentration in one area, another may have a different concentration in some other area. So figuring out the right mix, right? Which is why I call cybersecurity an art of how do I ensure the network and the devices and the data are all protected from either unauthorized access or unauthorized disclosure, and protect and insulate the organization from possibly an insider threat issue or a malicious outsider, and what safeguards do I put in place to ultimately protect the triad of security, right? What we're looking for in the triad of security is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. At the end of the day, that's what information security specialists do. We balance the triad, and whenever the triad comes out of balance, we have to figure out what is the best way to put it back in balance and find that right mixture again, right? And I try to make everything or put everything in more simplistic ways, mainly because, and you'll find, and we'll talk about it a little later in this session, the easier you make something sound, the better someone's going to understand it. A general user really, they know that they can come in, log into their computer, maybe send an email or two, open up their spreadsheets, and that's their day, right? And they don't understand, nor do they want to understand the intimate pieces and parts and bits and bytes of how computers and networks and systems operate. So being able to tear it down to a more simplistic level is really going to be the key to how far you can go in this particular career field. That is a broad general overview, right, of what cybersecurity is. But like I said, there are dozens of other careers inside this world of cybersecurity, right? Whether it's cloud security or managing privacy, project management, penetration testing. Now, I've been kind of blessed, right? In my career that I've had an opportunity to do a lot of things that a lot of people never got the opportunity to do, especially so young in their career like I did. I started my career after I finished with my bachelor's in networking as a red team tester for the Department of Defense. And that was more fun than I could have ever imagined for about 2 or 3 years. But I happened to know somebody that knew somebody that put in a good word for me, and verily I was hired. So, again, I don't know what I did in a past life to make this life, better, but I got lucky in a lot of places. So I got to do a lot of red team exercises, right? Actual penetration testing on networks, across the country, across the state, across the world, and really enjoyed it. However, even though I was having fun, you get capped in certain areas, right? You're only going to go so far based on your individual talents. Progressing in this field, it really starts to become more and more about how can you bring other people along, or how can you manage other things, projects or personnel or what have you. So I moved from doing penetration testing into doing a lot of what we call GRC, or compliance management, overall risk management for organizations. I've been everything from a CISO for top 1,000 organizations, all the way, to managing global networks for the Army. But I would not have been able to get to that point if I didn't have, and spend a lot of time on the mastery of the basics, right? Mastering the understanding of that foundation really is what it all comes down to. How well do I know certain pieces of the broader good, because it all fits together across itself, right? It's how can I manage how the people are doing X with whatever type of application against what the organizational posture has been dictated to be, and where can I make some trade-offs and where can I tighten things down and loosen things up to make sure the organization has the security posture that ultimately the CEO has mandated or dictated that he or she wants for the organization. So especially if you're brand new in getting into this field, I highly recommend spending a lot of time mastering the basics. Kind of start at the beginning. I know it may feel like it may take a long time to get where you want to go, but once you have those masteries of the simple parts, right? What are the components in a computer? How do I administer a server platform? How do I administer a workstation platform? What are the differences between certain workstation and server platforms? How do I review audit logs? What are the components of the network, and how do they interact with each other? Do I need to put a bridge here, a switch, a router, a repeater? Do I run copper or fiber, right? Understanding all of those and mastering all of those basics. Once you get to those more difficult decision points, as something has happened and here's the basic architecture that we're dealing with, it's a lot easier to decompose what risk was ultimately realized and where possibly to start looking. Now, like I said, there's lots of different directions that you can go. And again, I went and, I think what I'd say several directions over the course of these 14, 15 years. But the direction that I went is not necessarily the direction that you would have to go. Just understand that there are plenty of, there's a wide variety of choices that if you like computers or people at all, you can find your place in this field. So one thing that I did, went out, find what is forecasted to be in the next 3 years, the top need positions, right, across organizations and whatnot. And there's a few different surveys out there that kind of agree with each other. So I tried to pull some of the broadest ones. Cybersecurity managers, right? Cybersecurity engineers, they kind of, have a tendency to top out, right? Near the top of them. A network engineer, there, it's interesting, honestly, just for me to see a network engineer tucked in there. Because there's a whole lot of similarity between a network engineer and a cybersecurity engineer. One is just more broad than the other. But you can see all three of them are right around that same salary range, right above $100,000 a year. And depending on where you live, of course, that range is going to vary. I have friends that live in the middle of the country, right out there in Kansas-ish type area, where those salaries are about right, for them in that area. I live in Huntsville, Alabama. So Huntsville, Alabama is a very, it centers around what's called the Redstone Arsenal. And so everything around here is kind of defense related, right? So, and the Department of Defense has a tendency to pay a little more for some of those same positions. And then of course, sometimes they pay a lot less than what people are actually worth, but it's just one of those, how do you get in the middle there? So that average network engineer salary here in Huntsville it'd be closer to maybe 119, 120 or so. Now you go take that out to California, now you're looking at 175-ish, right, for a network engineer. About 125 or so for a cybersecurity manager or a cybersecurity engineer. Analysts, now I don't know your individual situations, but analysts, when I was working with red teams, was primarily the heading that they put me under, right? Is I was a cybersecurity analyst. I went out, researched and possibly ran exploits, and then provided a report of what we found, right? So at the end of the day, right, I was an analyst, and usually I reported to a cybersecurity manager doing those tasks. So, but $95,000 is nothing to shake a stick at, right? Depending on what you consider a lot of money. And remember, I mean, these are average salaries for high entry level to mid-grade positions, right? So it's not a bad place to start, to start out, if you ask me. Cybersecurity consultants, this is one I threw in there mainly because I didn't necessarily agree with it at all. $91,000 for a cybersecurity consultant, depending on what type of consultancy it is. And they really didn't elaborate on it, but prior to the position that I have now, I spent 5 or 6 years, I guess, as an independent cybersecurity consultant. And I guess on a bad year, I would make right around $95,000, $100,000. But I guess it just depends on what type of consultant you are. So I found that amusing. So I tossed it in there because you would typically think that maybe a consultant would eclipse the salaries, for instance, of an engineer or a manager, because they're supposed to be the experts that you're calling in to get some information. But again, what do I know? So how do you get here? How do you get to where any of those types of jobs, or the jobs that or the careers that you want to go after? Well, it all starts with basically a self-inventory. What are you good at? And what you're good at may not always line up with what do you want to do, right? I would love to be, a race car driver, but I'm not good at it. I have a hard time parallel parking sometimes, right? So this is a time for you to be critical with yourself. What are your good and what are you good at? What is your current skill inventory? Now, that's not to say you can't get better at something, but remember, you're trying, well, I guess best advice at that point I say is, okay, remember, you're thinking about a career. You're thinking about where do you want to be, not necessarily a year from now, but 3 and 5 and 10 years from now. And doing something that's no fun, to me, it doesn't make sense for me, right? There are just certain boundaries that I draw, and I like to go to work and have, at least a little bit of fun every now and again, right? So do you have good analytical skills, right? Do you like putting puzzles together? Can you take seemingly disparate, unrelated pieces of information and put them together and make a clear picture out of them? Are you good at managing people or managing projects, managing tasks, right? Are you a very detail-oriented person or a results-oriented person? Maybe you already have, some level of skill at pen testing, and that's what you really love doing, and that's where you want to be for the remainder of your career, right? So it really all just comes down to taking a good self-inventory and figuring out where you need to be to get where you want to go. Now, some of these skills are nice to have, others are must-haves, right? So one of the things, especially in today's field, in today's career field, I apologize for my dog. She's over there driving me nuts, shaking her bell. One of the things that are just must-haves these days are good writing skills. You have to be able to write and convey what you're saying or what you mean, so that other people absolutely understand what your intent is, right? So if this is an area that you know that you suffer in, highly recommend you go and maybe take a writing class, right? There's, community colleges and, kind of every state across the country and around the world that offer free creative writing classes, right? Just because you're not writing about routers and switches doesn't mean you're not making your craft better. If you can draw a picture in someone's mind about anything, right? How to bake a pizza, then you can make that picture happen in their mind when it comes to technical things. But absolute must is having those writing skills. Next, and kind of absolute must for today's information security specialist, is not only having the hard skills, right, the technical skills on how we execute within the bounds of the keyboard, but also having soft skills. Now, by soft skills, what do I mean? Being able to talk to others in a way that they can understand. I read a survey about, I want to say 6 months ago, and the single largest complaint from the top 25 CISOs across the country are their technical people cannot speak to their customers. Which causes frustration with the customer, right, with the users. Being able to talk to them, having a level of sympathy and empathy with their problem, even if it's, the mouse won't move, but they didn't plug it in, or in some cases didn't turn the computer on. Being able to show the customer that you're there to help and you want to help. So if for instance, this is a weakness of yours, and having soft skills, especially with all of us highly technical people, is one of those things that we just have, it's one of our weaknesses that we have to plan for. Or have to get better at, I guess would be the right answer. Practice the soft skills, practice with your family, right? Being a little, empathetic and sympathetic and helping them do, whatever they need to do. So wherever you are technically, wherever your skills are technically, you can learn those in a book and with some practice. And some of it just becomes rote memorization. Others take a little more time, and that's where learning how to do good technical writing and having those soft skills are going to come into handy. And then, so how do I get there? What are the things that I need to do to get those both hard and soft skills? Well, I wholeheartedly believe in a well-rounded information security specialist has some level of classical education, like brick and mortar or online, go to school, read the books, take the test, write the report type of education. And then be able to show that they can take that conceptual knowledge and apply it in a practical manner. right? I know the book says this, but in the real world, how does that apply, right? Now that's difficult. I understand. Trust me, I've been there with, how do I get the practical work experience without work experience, right? And I don't think anyone has ever given me the magic sauce how to necessarily do that. I can only kind of give it to you from my perspective and some of the individuals I've mentored over the years. Uh, be willing to do anything, right? Whatever the assignment is, no matter how benign it may seem at the time, be willing to do anything. So that way, even if you're only hired, for instance, as, I don't know, an IT technician, that all you do is fix printers all day. The more you show that you're willing to do anything as well as fix printers, you'll start, people will start to notice, and they'll notice that you have additional skills, and they'll start giving you additional responsibilities. And now you can get that good mixture between the two. Certifications in this career field are a must. For instance, if you're going to get a job, for instance, in the industry that I'm in, that I've done most of my career in, working inside the Department of Defense and the federal agencies, most of the resumes that I look at, most of the people that I hire, and if they don't have at least a Security Plus certification, their resume gets put to the side. I don't look at it, regardless of their classical education and their work experience, because there are certain regulations and mandates that that are in place that you have to have, for instance, a Security Plus at a minimum. Don't feel you have to get all these certifications at once. Or in a short amount of time. These are designed to be progressive certifications, things that you grow into over time. Not let me go out and get these 5 certifications because every job description I look at says I have to have them. Because another thing that hiring managers look at is, how much work experience do you have? What is your base education, right? Whether it's an associate's degree or bachelor's degree or whatever. And then you have 5 or 6 certifications as well, right? So that actually raises more red flags for hiring managers than most people understand, right? Because they were designed to be progressive certifications, right? I did not get my Security Plus, Linux Plus, and Network Plus all within 6 months of each other, right? Probably it was usually about a year between all of them. All the certifications that you see here, I currently hold, but it took me 5 or 6 years to collect them, right? Because you have to get more work experience and knowledge and a foundation to get to those points. We spoke about the soft and technical skills, so hopefully you understand that. However, the last piece I want to give you here is the understanding of the absolute need and attention that's being drawn to ethics. Some industries, again, you will have to prove your ethical, fortitude, if you will, because you'll have to pass, some stringent background checks and things like that. Others, more in a corporate environment, they're still going to do background checks and what have you, but they have to get a sense that they can absolutely trust you under all circumstances, because you're going to have access to data that a normal person just doesn't have access to. Not only do you have access to the front desk manager's email, you have access to the CEO's email, right? And people that in some form or fashion have indicated over the course of their lives that maybe their ethical boundaries are a little squishy, have a hard time right now finding gainful and employment. And how do they make these conclusions? How do they draw these conclusions? Well, I'm not sure that I agree with all of them. Some of them are highly suspect as far as even their own efficacy. But your social media feeds are an outstanding place for individuals to figure out kind of who you are. Whether or not it's true is kind of a discussion for another day. But beware of what you post, right? Because you can pretty much assure yourself that once you deliver that resume, they're going to, at least at minimum, maybe go check out your Twitter or your Facebook feed, right? And then they start drawing ethical, if you will, conclusions from there. So I wanted to include these for you, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to that we're going to provide these slides to you. I'm not super sure how they'll get to you or whatnot. Maybe it'll be available as a digital download on the YouTube channel or what have you. But these are some outstanding places that I've used over the course of my career to do training for myself or recommend training for others. The Cybersecurity Bootcamp, that is hosting this. Outstanding place to not only get started and get your foot in the door, but also to kind of grow with and be there for you over the course of your career, right? Another thing that I love about doing this job and these jobs that I've had over the years is it's impossible to know it all, right? The more you think the less, the more you learn. Let's try it again. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. No one can know all of this stuff, right? Which is where some of those specialties come in, right? I found my specialty and overall risk management and cyber hygiene and policy writing and things like that. Even though I started as an ethical hacker, right, on the other side, attacking networks. So, and then again, just a few blogs that I check out, weekly, great updates on vulnerabilities and threats and what other people are finding and doing, and kind of keep your head in the game. This is a career field that it kind of never turns off, right? You'll never have necessarily an opportunity to turn it off and walk away. But most people in this career field, that is kind of how they like life. That's kind of how they like it anyway. So, so I wanted to provide a little bit of at least some places to start for you to get you over to that next